The 12-year-old girl pressed herself against the classroom doorframe, watching her mother's weathered hands scrub away the chalk dust that clung to expensive marble floors. In the sterile fluorescent light of Pembroke Academy's most prestigious classroom, Megan Williams had never felt more invisible until the moment she heard them laughing about her. "Perhaps we should let the janitor's daughter take a crack at it," sneered Richard Thornfield, adjusting his gold cufflinks as he gestured dismissively toward the advanced calculus problem sprawled across the whiteboard. The other members of the Parent Advisory Committee erupted in laughter, their voices echoing off the mahogany-paneled walls like bullets ricocheting in a chamber. "Maybe she can at least clean the board properly when she's done embarrassing herself." Megan's breath caught in her throat. Through the crack in the door, she could see her mother, Denise, pause in her mopping, her shoulders tensing imperceptibly. But Denise Williams had perfected the art of invisibility over 15 years of cleaning up after the children of Manhattan's elite. She simply squeezed her mop tighter and continued working, as if she hadn't heard the cruel words that cut through the air like shards of glass. The problem on the board was a differential equation that would challenge most college juniors. Dr. Harrison, the mathematics department head, had been struggling to explain it to his AP calculus class for the better part of an hour. Now, with the parent committee observing his teaching methods, he was growing visibly frustrated. His star pupil, Bradley Thornfield Richard's son and the presumptive winner of the upcoming state mathematics competition, sat in the front row with a blank expression, his usually confident demeanor cracking under the pressure. "Well, Doctor?" Harrison's voice carried a note of desperation as he turned to Bradley. "Can you show us how to solve for the particular solution?" Bradley's face flushed crimson. The golden boy who had sailed through every mathematical challenge Pembroke had thrown at him suddenly looked like what he was, a 17-year-old who had relied more on expensive tutoring than genuine understanding. The integration by parts method isn't working the way I expected." Richard Thornfield's jaw tightened. His donation of $500,000 to the school's new science wing hadn't bought his son brilliance, apparently. The other parents shifted uncomfortably in their designer chairs, the unspoken truth hanging heavy in the air. For all their money and connections, their children weren't as exceptional as they'd believed. Megan had been coming to Pembroke Academy every evening for 3 years, ever since her mother took the cleaning job to supplement their meager income from her day job at the laundromat. While Denise scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans, Megan would sit in empty classrooms, absorbing fragments of lessons from discarded worksheets and half-erased whiteboards. She had taught herself algebra from textbooks left behind by careless students, devoured calculus concepts from professors' forgotten notes, and solved problems that lay crumpled in wastebaskets. Mathematics had been Megan's secret sanctuary since she was 8 years old. In their cramped one-bedroom apartment in Washington Heights, she would spread out pages of equations like other children might arrange dolls or toy cars. Numbers didn't care about the color of her skin or the fact that her clothes came from thrift stores. In the realm of mathematics, poverty and privilege held no sway, only logic reigned supreme. "Perhaps we should move on to a simpler problem, Doctor," Harrison suggested weakly, his reputation crumbling with each passing second of silence. "No," Richard Thornfield's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I pay $45,000 a year for my son to attend this institution. He will solve this problem, or someone will explain to me why Pembroke Academy is failing to educate its students properly." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone present. Donations could be withdrawn, board memberships could be revoked, careers could be ended with a few well-placed phone calls to the right people. Dr. Harrison's hands trembled slightly as he approached the board again. "Bradley, let's try a different approach. If we consider the homogeneous equation first." "I can solve it." The words escaped Megan's lips before she could stop them. The entire room turned toward the doorway where she stood, her slight frame dwarfed by the massive oak doors. For a moment, the only sound was the soft drip of her mother's mop hitting the bucket. "Excuse me?" Dr. Harrison blinked as if he were seeing a mirage. Megan stepped into the room, her worn sneakers squeaking against the freshly cleaned marble. She could feel the weight of every gaze upon her, some curious, others openly hostile. Her mother's eyes were wide with alarm, silently pleading with her daughter to retreat before she made things worse for both of them. "The problem on the board," Megan said, her voice growing stronger despite the tremor in her hands. "I can solve it." A ripple of laughter spread through the parent committee. Margaret Ashworth, wife of a federal judge, actually snorted. "This is absurd. Harold, surely you're not going to entertain this disruption?" Dr. Harrison looked caught between his professional instincts and the social pressures surrounding him. The girl was clearly out of place. Her mother was the cleaning woman, for heaven's sake. But something in her eyes, a quiet confidence he recognized from his years of teaching gifted students, gave him pause. "She doesn't even attend this school," Bradley said, his voice carrying a note of desperation. The golden boy was grasping for any excuse to avoid his own mathematical inadequacy. "That's right," Megan replied calmly. "I attend Washington Heights Public School 143. But I've been watching these lessons for 3 years while my mother works, and I know how to solve this problem." Richard Thornfield leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Oh, this should be entertaining. Harold, by all means, let the help's daughter show us how it's done. When she fails spectacularly, perhaps it will remind everyone here of the natural order of things." Dr. Harrison hesitated for another moment, then stepped aside. "Very well. Show us what you can do." Megan approached the whiteboard on unsteady legs. The equation stared back at her, a complex differential equation with multiple variables that had stumped a room full of supposedly brilliant minds. Behind her, she could hear whispered comments and barely contained laughter. Someone mentioned calling security. Another voice suggested this was some kind of publicity stunt, but as Megan picked up the marker, the noise faded away. The intimidating faces behind her became irrelevant. There was only her, the equation, and the beautiful logic that connected them. She began to write, her movements fluid and confident. Where Bradley had struggled with integration by parts, Megan recognized that the equation could be simplified using a substitution method that transformed it into a much more manageable form. Her handwriting was neat despite her nervousness, each step clearly labeled and explained. "First, we recognize that this is a Bernoulli equation," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. "If we make the substitution v equals y to the power of 1 minus n, where n equals 2 in this case, we can transform it into a linear first-order differential equation." Dr. Harrison's mouth fell open. Behind him, the parent committee had gone completely quiet, their earlier amusement replaced by something approaching shock. Megan continued working, her marker squeaking against the board as she transformed the complex equation step by step. "Once we have the linear form, we can find the integrating factor and solve for v, then substitute back to find y." She turned briefly to face the room. "The key insight is recognizing the underlying structure rather than getting lost in the complexity of the surface presentation." When she finished, the complete solution filled nearly half the whiteboard. Every step was correct. Every mathematical insight was sound, and her final answer matched the one in Dr. Harrison's teacher's manual, the manual he kept locked in his desk drawer. But Megan wasn't finished. "However," she continued, turning back to the board, "there's actually an elegant shortcut that makes this problem much simpler to solve." She began writing again, this time deriving a more efficient method that reduced the solution time by half. "If you recognize that this particular equation fits a special case pattern, you can solve it directly without the substitution step." The silence in the room was deafening. "Doctor." Harrison stared at the board as if it contained hieroglyphics from an alien civilization. The parent committee sat frozen in their expensive chairs, their superiority complex cracking like ice in spring sunlight. Richard Thornfield was the first to break the silence. "This is impossible," he whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Someone must have told her." "No one told me anything," Megan said quietly, setting down the marker. "I learned by watching, by reading discarded textbooks, by working through problems that others threw away." She looked directly at Richard Thornfield, her 12-year-old eyes holding a wisdom that made him deeply uncomfortable. "Intelligence isn't something you can buy, Mr. Thornfield, and it doesn't care about the color of your skin or how much money your father makes." The room erupted. Parents began talking over each other, their voices a mixture of astonishment and indignation. Dr. Harrison stood transfixed, staring at the most elegant mathematical solution he had ever seen presented by a student, any student, at any level. "This changes nothing," Margaret Ashworth declared, her voice shrill with barely controlled panic. She's still just the cleaning woman's daughter. She doesn't belong here." But her words rang hollow now. The evidence was literally written on the wall in clear, undeniable mathematical proof. Megan Williams, the invisible girl who came to school every evening in her mother's shadow, had just demonstrated a level of mathematical understanding that surpassed every student at Pembroke Academy. "I want to see her school records, Doctor," Harrison said suddenly, his academic instincts finally overriding his social conditioning. "I want to know what kind of program she's in, who her teachers are." "She attends a public school in Washington Heights," Denise Williams spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but steady. She had stopped mopping and now stood proudly beside her daughter. "Her teachers do their best with 35 students in a classroom and textbooks from 1998, but Megan has always been special. She taught herself more mathematics by age 10 than most students learn in high school." Richard Thornfield stood abruptly, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is ridiculous. I won't sit here and be lectured by the hired help." He gestured dismissively at Megan. "Parlor tricks and memorization don't make someone a mathematician. Real success requires breeding, connections, the right environment." "Mr. Thornfield, Doctor," Harrison interrupted, his voice carrying new authority. "Your son has been struggling with pre-calculus for 2 years, despite the best tutoring money can buy. This young lady just solved a problem that challenges graduate students. I think it's time we reconsidered our definitions of real success." The parent committee began to fracture along predictable lines. Some, like Margaret Ashworth and Richard Thornfield, retreated into denial and defensiveness. Others, particularly those whose own children had struggled academically despite every advantage, began to see Megan's achievement for what it truly was, a demonstration of raw intellectual ability that transcended social boundaries. "Doctor." Harrison walked to his desk and picked up his phone. "I'm calling Doctor Sarah Chen at MIT," he announced. "She runs the youth mathematics program there. If Miss Williams is interested, I believe we should explore every opportunity available to her." "Now wait just a minute," Richard Thornfield snapped. "You can't seriously be suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that talent deserves recognition regardless of its packaging," Dr. Harrison replied firmly. "This young lady has just demonstrated mathematical abilities that our institution should be honored to nurture, not dismiss." Word of the miracle at Pembroke spread quickly through New York's educational circles. By the end of the week, reporters had discovered the story of the 12-year-old daughter of a cleaning woman who had solved advanced calculus problems that stumped the children of Manhattan's elite. The narrative was irresistible, a real-life Goodwill Hunting story with a young black girl as the unlikely protagonist. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived from MIT 3 days later, accompanied by a team of educational psychologists and mathematics professors. They spent 4 hours testing Megan's abilities, presenting her with increasingly complex problems drawn from graduate-level coursework. She solved them all with the same quiet confidence she had displayed in the Pembroke classroom. "This is extraordinary, Doctor," Chen told reporters outside the school. "Megan demonstrates intuitive mathematical understanding at a level I rarely see in doctoral candidates. She doesn't just solve problems, she perceives underlying patterns and structures that allow her to approach mathematics in genuinely innovative ways." The story exploded across national media. "Genius hidden in plain sight," declared the New York Times. "Brilliant student discovers herself while mother cleans classrooms," reported CNN. The Washington Post ran a feature story titled, "The Girl Who Solved What Harvard Couldn't." For Megan, the sudden attention was overwhelming. Camera crews followed her from her apartment building to her public school, where teachers and administrators scrambled to provide appropriate academic challenges for their newly famous student. Pembroke Academy, meanwhile, found itself in the uncomfortable position of explaining why they had overlooked such exceptional talent for 3 years. The phone calls began almost immediately. Full scholarships from elite private schools, university programs designed for gifted children, research opportunities at major institutions, job offers for Denise that would allow her to leave her cleaning work forever. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came 2 weeks later, when Richard Thornfield knocked on the door of their small apartment in Washington Heights. Gone was his earlier arrogance, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice careful and measured, "I came to apologize and to discuss a proposition." Denise opened the door wider, inviting him into their modest living room where Megan sat surrounded by textbooks from MIT's mathematics library. "I was wrong," Richard continued, the words clearly difficult for him. "Completely wrong. About your daughter, about intelligence, about what really matters." He paused, looking directly at Megan. "I've spoken with the board at Pembroke. We would like to offer you a full scholarship, along with access to our advanced placement programs and university-level courses. We've also arranged for your mother to take a position as our Director of Facilities Management, with a salary that reflects the true value of her contributions to our institution." Megan looked up from her calculus textbook, considering the offer. With the same analytical precision she applied to mathematical problems. "Mr. Thornfield," she said finally, "I appreciate the opportunity, but I've decided to accept MIT's early admission program. I'll be starting college next fall." Richard Thornfield nodded slowly, a rueful smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Of course you have, and they're lucky to have you." He stood to leave, then turned back one final time. "For what it's worth, my son Bradley has asked if you might be willing to tutor him in mathematics. He says he wants to learn to think about problems the way you do." Megan smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her since this journey began. "I'd be happy to help him, Mr. Thornfield. After all, everyone deserves a chance to discover what they're truly capable of achieving." As Richard Thornfield left their apartment and walked back toward his waiting limousine, he reflected on the lessons of the past few weeks. Genius, he had learned, wore no particular uniform and spoke with no particular accent. It could not be purchased or inherited, only recognized and nurtured. And sometimes, just sometimes, it took the form of a 12-year-old girl who had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to give her a chance to shine. The math problem that had started it all still hung on the Pembroke Academy whiteboard, preserved now as a reminder of the day everything changed. But for Megan Williams, it was just the beginning. The real equation she had solved was far more complex than any differential calculus. She had proven that brilliance plus opportunity could overcome any obstacle, no matter how formidable it might appear. In the margin of her notebook that night, she wrote a simple formula. Talent plus perseverance plus opportunity equals unlimited potential. It was, she thought with satisfaction, an equation that always balanced perfectly, regardless of the variables involved.